We are inviting artists to work with M16 American Assault Rifles to turn them into works of art. They're decommissioned rifles, so they've been used. That's the project. It's the sister project to the last one we did, which was the AK-47s. The artists will produce their weapons. They'll produce their converted weapons into works of art, and then we're going to show them at the ICA in London during Freeze Week. I think historically the idea of making art has a social function to it, and I think that social function has, at least since the onslaught of modernity, been critical. I think artists who make art are often people who exist on the margins and peripheries of society because they have things to say about it which are challenging. I think the problem is that the mechanisms of resistance are such that it's very difficult for artists to have any kind of power over social change directly. But I think the point is that making art is a possible site for at least an interruption into how things are. And I think that most of the artists that we've engaged in this project would probably agree that their work is socially orientated. That is to say that it's attempting to challenge or change social circumstances for the better. When I met Mr. Gilly, I was very, very impressed by the pragmatism that he showed. I think that one of the problems I have an opinion about the idea of charitable services in relation to the idea of governments that have chosen to de-emphasize the function of tax. So there's some senses the idea that people can now act. You can commodify your sense of charity by putting your hand in your pocket and paying for the charity you choose, rather than having money taken from you at source by tax. I think it would be much easier if things were taken by tax, but in a kind of a free market enterprise, this doesn't seem to be something that most people share. The thing I like about Peace One Day is that it has a pragmatism to it which is not bound up by a moral or ethical idealism which is impossible to achieve. I think the thing that's good about Peace One Day is that it sets itself achievable goals, and I think that's the thing I really like about it. And I think although it's kind of obviously generated from the West, it's not arrogant about its claims, and it's not chauvinistic about its assumption that it's exporting a kind of a rationalized version of civilization to countries that it sees as being lower than itself. I think it's a very sensitive and has a very refined notion of what needs to be done. Well, last year we curated a project along similar lines where we got decommissioned AK-47 rifles and got artists, a list of artists to convert them to works of art. And in a sense, the AK-47 is emblematic of a kind of a kind of illegitimate side of violence, the kind of the fundamentalist or the terroristic side, because it's kind of associated with more I suppose revolutionary or radicalized sort of armies, like non-nation state armies. And I think the idea of using the M16 is that we wanted to show also that violence is also funded by states and countries which are somehow seen as kind of legitimate. So the M16 is the predominant American weapon, which we wanted to kind of maybe sort of make some kind of gesture towards the idea of thinking that M16s represent perhaps a kind of the idea of exporting democracy from the West via you know, the superpower of America and the associate allies with Britain and stuff, so that we were kind of trying to, you know, somehow equalise the implication that it's not only the illegitimacy of the AK-47, it's the legitimacy of the M16, which also causes violence. Practically, it'll give money to Peace One Day projects to support them financially, but also, you know, I suppose the idea of actually getting kind of well-known artists involved is that it is the reach, the idea of the reaching different situations, you know, distributing the message of Peace One Day in different media and different formats, so that people are aware of what it's doing. I think that's probably the most important thing, is just advertising the cause in a way. I think most of the artists, because a lot of the artists that I've approached are they probably receive quite a few requests for their collaboration. I think what's particular about this one is that I think the artists I've spoken to really had a real sense of the tangibility of the project and the tangibility of Peace One Day. And in a sense, I think that you know, I think in a way, you know, people would say that it's a non-political project, but in a sense, its politics are much more to do with the infrastructure of changing people's opinion about violence rather than party politics or nation-state politics. And I think that's how I think people respond on that level. And I think, as I said before, it's a very tangible project, and I think the artists were very. I think they could see things very, you know, very clearly, you know, and I think most artists I've spoken to are very, their responses are very quick, very straightforward.